Hi, I'm Timo Harboe. I'm a self-employed computational designer, and this is my NORDFY talk.
Hi, welcome to another NORDFY Talks episode. Today I'm here with computational designer Timo Harboe. Welcome.
Thank you
nice
very
to have
much.
you here. I will start to ask you about yourself and your background and perhaps what is exciting about the work that you do.
Yeah, so maybe short about myself. I am half a year into my adventure as a solo consultant in computational design. So I'll say pretty much everything about what I do right now is pretty exciting. But my background comes from structural engineering. I started some years back as a structural engineer out of university in Bjarke Ingels group, and started in a very small engineering department there where an innovation mindset was kind of very central to the whole department. And I worked as a structural engineer there and kept increasing my computational design skills at the same time. And then after some years, I went to Rambøll, again as a structural engineer, but this time also with a computational design lead role, initially not officially, but then later I was then the computational design lead of Rambøll buildings in Denmark. And then at one point I started to get this nagging feeling that maybe I should start my own little adventure. And then I did so, and now I'm Timo Harboe working for Timo Harboe.
Yes, very good. So Timo Harboe is a solo adventure. Is this part of a strategy to go out of the big company and be on your own, take your own decisions, or this is part of a growing strategy to become a reference company?
Like, you can probably ask me again in 5 years and I may say something different, but for now my goal is to just be Timo Harboe. I don't have a big grand plan to take over the world with my company. I really like this thought of being my own boss and not have any other obligations than doing cool work and take care of myself, essentially.
This must be very different from the work that you have performed previously at the larger organization. So what are the parallelism, or how do we differentiate what is in common becoming a solo entrepreneur when compared to working on a large organizations? How does this have influenced perhaps the transition to become a solo entrepreneur?
Well, it is definitely a huge difference being in a large corporation, actually having a team that you're working with. Like, it's not that I was a department manager or anything, but we had a computational design team with a lot of different skill sets in, and I can also see that it's something that I also sometimes miss a little bit, like having that, can you call it, like a big group of people that you can ask for help in different things. On the other hand, it also gives an immense freedom to not have those obligations that come with that.
Yeah.
But while we're saying that, I can also see that the more tasks I get in, I see, but maybe this task is something that could somehow be outsourced, or maybe I can do this and that.
So if I may, I would like to ask you, what led you to take this decision to go solo, leave the big organizations? You mentioned that you came from Bjarke Ingels group to Rambøll, Henning Larsen. It's a big difference, as you just mentioned. What drove you to take that decision?
It's a very good question, because I think I can't point to one single thing that drove me to it, but I've always had this desire that one day I'm gonna have my own thing. It has been quite deep in me that is something I want. I don't see myself working in any of the companies I've been at for the next 20 years, for example, though I have enjoyed it very much, like in the places I've been. I think ultimately what drove me was a desire to have a bit of a higher risk profile on good and bad, that when I succeed in something, it goes like it gives a big return. And when I don't succeed in something, of course, it does the opposite. But I kind of enjoy that, and I like that very much. And in all my jobs that I've had, I've always kind of tried to build something in the companies I've been in. Like I've enjoyed trying to build a movement for computational design inside Rambøll. Same in Big when I was there. Like I've always loved this building something. And then to build something for myself now is quite inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rewarding, I guess.
It's very rewarding.
Yeah,
at least when it's good, then it's rewarding.
At least when it's good. So perhaps when it's not so good, what are the challenges that you see on this solo entrepreneurial life compared to the experience you had on the large firms?
I think there's, of course, the normal challenges that anyone who goes and start their own company has in terms of the risk and the unknowns and all that. But I think one of the less obvious ones is this: to have very skilled, experienced people right next to you at all times. So when I was in Rambøll, for example, I had people with 30 years of experience within the field, and like they could go to the problem with closed eyes and tell me everything I've done wrong. And that is something that I don't have anymore, and that can sometimes be a challenge.
Yeah.
That's also like I do a lot to kind of maintain a network and try to give a lot to the network, and then also ask some people every now and then for advice on different things to kind of keep that possibility to learn from others.
Yeah, like an informal mentorship. Yeah. So focusing a little bit on what you do particularly, what are these key competencies that you have that perhaps differentiates you or your product or your services? What would you say it's a little bit more of a unique approach or product that you want to offer?
Well, I think it's easy to say where like, what I have that is maybe the same as a lot of other people, and that is like I know how to use programming in a design industry. And like there are a lot of people that are computational designers and do that very well. I think some of the stuff I learned in Rambøll was very, very useful for me in terms of understanding the business value some of these things bring. That tend to be a general challenge that a lot of people with similar profiles like myself are facing. And that is that these solutions that we try to bring to the table, or what can you say, when we develop something, we often fall in love with the tool and the programming and the algorithms more than the actual problem we're solving. Well, I've seen it many times also with myself that like, hey, we could do this amazing tool, this is super cool, and we just often fail to ask, is it something that anyone needs? Is it something there is a business value in? And I think that through my work in Rambøll, I kind of learned that the only way I could succeed there was by focusing very, very heavily on the business value of things, because then naturally doors open.
Yeah.
If you can say, hey, we can save this amount of money, or we can generate this amount of potential revenue by automating this process, then everyone listens a lot more than when you say, I have a really cool idea. So I think to have that mix of skills is what makes it possible for me to have my own company now, at least.
So perhaps looking a little bit into what you're talking about, these tasks that you have been doing, or maybe the other way around. You said you don't want to solve a problem that doesn't exist. You want to go straight to the tasks that are meaningful and perhaps solve a client's wish or necessities. So how did you find those tasks? Or so were the tasks coming to you or you going to the task?
So when I was in both Rambøll and Big, there was of course things coming in because people knew, hey, Timo, he can do this cool stuff with automation. So a lot of things came in, but I did a lot to be very loud. Like I was communicating a lot. What can we do with this? How does it bring value to what we do? And that way around, I got in contact with a lot of people internally that also had different challenges that they needed help with. So I went hunting for challenges with, blindfolded, and like really just spreading it, and then something comes back.
Perhaps I'm going to shift gears and talk about the communicator. Timo, you're talking about your ability to communicate, or at least you're very, very loudly communicating that you have those skills, you went after tasks. So you recently opened your YouTube channel. You have been very present on LinkedIn. You have a growing community of followers that are interested in what you are doing. So how would you judge, or how important is your presence in the virtual platforms?
I think I actually want to take one step back from that and talk about like why I started communicating it more. And I had a time back when I was in big. There was some weeks where I felt my job was really quite tough. That I was like, I need to find something else. And I talked with a friend of mine about these frustrations that I had in those weeks, but also that I didn't really have an alternative. And then my friend there was like, but like you need to build a network while you don't need it. Like if you just call someone tomorrow and say, hey, do you have a possibility for me? Then the answer is normally always no. But if you build that network while you're in a good position, you're gonna have a much easier time later on. So then I took that advice to me and was like, okay, I'm gonna keep sharing stuff with the world. So I started posting regularly on LinkedIn, and I started liking my job again. I kept it up with like keep communicating these things, because every time I posted something, someone would always get back with some additional advice. Like if I post, oh, I just discovered this method, then often someone will reply something super golden in the comments, or share it with someone else, and suddenly you get a private message from someone saying, hey, you can also do it like this. So for me, I could share knowledge with others, get knowledge back, and at the same time kind of get a name for myself, and suddenly not be in a position anymore where if I quit my job tomorrow, I don't know what to do, but be in a position where if I quit my job tomorrow, I'm going to be able to find something else. And that felt like much more powerful situation to be in. So that was why I started it. The reason I've kept up with it is because I just see that I get so much, both in terms of knowledge back, but also in terms of now business possibilities. Like since I started my company, I haven't done a cold call yet. It's all coming through inbound leads on LinkedIn. Now I've then started also to post a little bit on YouTube. I'm gonna see like if I can do that regularly, but I want to post some videos every now and then, both for my own sake, because I enjoy it. I find it really fun. It's a community that shares a lot, and I want to be part of that sharing. So like share for free, and you get a lot back.
Yeah, wait for the return. Yeah. So perhaps that ties into the next kind of detail on the professional daily job, so to speak, which is a teaser on where does your passion burn harder? Is you educating, training people, doing your videos, your courses, sharing knowledge, or is building systems and tools for companies? Is it either or it's both?
If I don't have the one, it's definitely that one that burns harder. Like I need both. If I only sit at home and program and develop tools, then I go crazy. I love it, but I also need something else. And I really enjoy this creation and engagement and building content. But if I only did that, then I would also go crazy. So I kind of need both.
Your description on LinkedIn reads, and I quote, "I thrive in the interface between structural engineering, architecture, and code." And I found that quite interesting and refreshing. So the question would be, so you're a structural engineer from education, or an architectural engineer. Perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on your educational background and how code and the whole computational part becomes such an inherent part of who you are today.
Yes, so I think my educational background is architectural engineering. that education is, I would say, probably 20% architecture and 80% more hardcore engineering. So I'd more say that I'm a structural engineering with an architectural understanding. So that's also why I came to BIG. I wanted to work close to architecture, but as a structural engineer. Then when it comes to the code part, it was something that I kind of managed to squeeze into my education whenever I had a chance. So I seeked out computation courses, programming courses, algorithms courses, and different courses that could help me actually increase my skill in that field.
Okay, and how important do you think this coding capabilities are moving forward, facing the next generations of projects and designs that needs help?
I think if we look at the AEC industry as a whole, I think it's incredibly big part of the future is not that everyone is a programmer, not that everyone should sit and be like hackers in corners, but there's so many inefficient processes, there's so much manual work, so much really amazing talent that is not really being used fully because people are sitting copy pasting spreadsheets around. So much time and effort is wasted on bad processes. And I've often come across situations where I, with 5 lines of code, could automate someone's process and save them several hours of work. So I think more and more graduates are coming out with these skills. So more and more people inside the big companies are starting to really see that, hey, we need this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in other occasions we talked about, to a certain extent, the power that computational designers actually have in influencing design options, both from a structural standpoint, technical standpoint, but also from an aesthetical standpoint. Yet the profession is based on perhaps slightly outdated workflows. And if we touch a little bit upon the AC industry as a whole, it typically lags behind technology. There's always these typical examples that we use, the promise of BIM, the revolutionary immersive realities experiences that promised so much but delivered so little. People have used some of these tools more as drafting vehicles and not so much as data-driven resources. There's all this promised or these gains that can be harvested with this technology that can help us enhance efficiencies, and we have been talking about that. But the AC industry is very reluctant in implementing that. Why? Why do you think the industry is reluctant? How can we help the industry improve?
I think one of the key reasons for reluctancy is like the whole business model of the AEC industry is not rewarding efficiency, because everything is on a time charged basis. Like if I go to a company and tell them that we can design this building in half the time, like, okay, then we get half the revenue, like roughly speaking. So if you just decrease the time something takes, like there is a long time before those kind of changes turn to any benefit. I think you need to change the business model for those increases in efficiencies to actually matter for the companies. Yeah. So one of the things that I tried to focus on a lot in my previous role was also the quality that these processes can bring and the decrease of risk. And that is something that a lot of people in management also see as interesting, because decreasing risk is good. So if you can, for example, do automated checks of models, like more than just a clash detection, but you can actually do smart checking of your model, smart checking of your analysis results to avoid sending something out where an error sneaks through. Those are the kind of things that are very interesting to implement with the current business standards. But also I had a colleague once who said it quite nicely about the lack of innovation in the AEC industry, that we better learn how to use our computers in an efficient way and design buildings using tech before some tech company really finds out how to design buildings. And of course, that's put a bit on the edge. But I think the message is quite clear that if some company manages to turn the business model around and take ownership of the full process and fully automate a large part of that process, I think a company like that could have a big edge. It has been tried a few times. It has often failed for many companies to try it, but I think it's a risk for the building industry.
It is often talked about the parallelism with Tesla against, for example, German car industry, that you have to decide if you are a technology company that designs cars, or if you are a car manufacturer that implements technology. And clearly, Tesla took the decision of being a technology company that designs cars, but of course, pitching that idea to architectural and engineering companies is very difficult, because you started being the car designer and technology has evolved to a level where today you have the technology company that designs. So there is something over there that it's, and you talked about something that is, I think it's incredibly important, which is the business model. They've improved efficiencies, means optimizations, but those optimizations go against the business model. So this is another conversation on its own. So maybe I would like to now pivot a little bit. You already answered my next question, which was, is the AC industry really innovating? So I'm thinking that maybe, and you said, no, it's not really innovating that much, but maybe I'll tie it with the latest developments in AI. How do you see this new technology, these new developments in AI influencing or impacting perhaps the business model, if you want to go that way, or also on the work with you, on the workflow, on the information, on the availability of data, on the predictability of designs? How do you see the industry moving in this new reality?
I think it's inevitable that AI is going to have a major impact on all industries. But I also think, I don't think that AI is going to take over and just design our buildings anytime soon. But I'm very positive generally about AI and the possibilities it brings. Some people see it as this, AI is going to destroy all jobs. So I more see it as it's going to help us really design a better built environment. I think our biggest challenge for that to happen is that the data sets we have are just terrible. We have in every company, as we talked about before, you have inconsistent BIM models, you have inconsistent way of storing data, and it's like that in all companies. More and more companies are starting to try to gather some information and build databases so they can use this data in a smart way. But before you have good data, you're not going to be able to utilize the power of AI for design. So I think the first impact we're going to see from AI is, of course, that employees will be able to work more efficiently. Just something like with ChatGPT, you can, if you have that part of your inbox, you can communicate with people faster. Then you can also use it potentially to generally navigate faster. You can use it to ask questions about your model, and it will maybe be able to help you answer those questions. So I think it's just going to be that everyone has a little personal assistant, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. So maybe to stress a little bit on that point of AI is not necessarily taking over our jobs or be designing buildings on their own anytime soon, whatever soon means. But how would you frame the necessity or the needed tools and mindsets for the future of the profession, or for the future professionals? What kind of tools and mindset are needed to tackle? Can we just continue as we are until now, or do we need to change something?
I think whether it's in the future or whether it's now, the most essential question that you should be asking is the computer better at this task than I am? If yes, then we should probably figure out how we can ask the computer to do it. And that can be with everything. copy pasting data from 20 different Excel sheets and merging it into one and doing that every day. Like, those are the kind of low hanging fruits where I normally say that if you have a boring task, it's most likely automatable. And when I talk with my clients about what are the things that we should aim for first, what is the first thing we should try to automate, what is the first thing we should get rid of, mostly asking, what is the most boring thing you do? And then if we start from there, that's likely the best starting point.
Yeah, that's the pain point. So perhaps you want to, now that you talked about this boring tasks, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on typical work. What can you offer your clients? What is that maybe a Timo Harboe as a service is really doing, promoting? What are your key client type? Where are you looking for?
So I have until now, the key type of client I've had are clients that deliver a certain type of product in bespoke variations. So someone are delivering a product, it can be bridges, the same type of bridge, but slightly different boundary conditions every time. Working with a company that is doing playgrounds. It's the same language every time, but slightly different. And I'm working in the orthopedics industry as well, with unique products every time, but based on the same recipe. So I have people that normally spending a lot of time modeling essentially the same thing, just in a slight variation again and again and again. So we have some like code names for some of the projects I'm working on, like from 6 hours to 6 minutes and stuff like that, that we can take these slow modeling processes or analysis processes and automate them.
Yeah.
So I would call it automation of bespoke design solutions.
And do you work alone, or are you hiring? Do you work with collaborators? You have interns working with you, students. What is the?
Not yet. So far, I'm working with myself, but in the companies that I work with, there are some of them that have computational designers in-house as well, and then they throw the tough questions at me, so that's quite fun and challenging. But there I have some people that I work very closely with, and that I also share a vibe, a bit as colleagues with them, which is very nice. But then there are other clients where I'm simply just delivering a solution. Like, they want a product that they can open up like a piece of software, and then they can spend like 90% less time on a task.
You said 9%.
90.
90%
or more.
less time.
It's,
I have two last questions, perhaps. I want to focus a little bit on education and the future.
Yes.
There are people that are either very young professionals or just starting their studies. And although computational design is not something necessarily new, there's suddenly the internet is filled with information, sometimes even difficult to navigate all this information. So perhaps talk a little bit about two things. What kind of recommendation would you give to young professionals, to students that are now starting their career or envisioning a career? And then maybe if you can also project in time, where do you see the AC industry going? Maybe we can start with the students, and
Yes.
What's your best advice for young professionals?
I think my best advice would be do the things that you like doing. Like, I think something like sitting down and coding in a corner like I do is maybe not enjoyable for everyone. So if you find it enjoyable, go for it. If not, then know what it can do as a minimum, and then do whatever you like. But I would say, if you find yourself in a position where you are actually finding this whole automation question interesting, and you enjoy the task of like solving a Sudoku, solving riddles, then I would highly recommend doing basic programming like courses, not to learn a programming language necessarily, but to learn that way of thinking. because what I do is, of course, programming. I make scripts, I write code, but my main product is my ability to turn a problem into algorithms, think like a computer, essentially. And that kind of thinking only comes through practicing with code. And I would say if you're working in a company, I'd also say be a bit selfish sometimes. Like, think about your own learning development. Maybe a task is not always solved the most efficiently with like writing a Python script, but do it. If you could solve the problem and you at the same time can learn something from it, then I would say go for it.
We talked before this interview. We talked a little bit about the value that it's out there in the industry. We didn't mention that yet. So maybe we can. Do you see a lot of value that is in the industry? I know that we talked a little bit before that you have been attending some of the hackathons here, not particularly participating, but you know the drill of
Yes.
of building tools and in an industry that it's slow to adapt. Do you see a lot of value in the industry, in the companies, in the individuals that you have met over the years? We are a thriving community here.
I think the computational design community is really quite unique. Like, there is so much passion. You often see students at universities that seek out this knowledge are doing it on their very, very own motivation. You see people in companies like running for tasks that involve computational design. Some will even say that, hey, I'm gonna do this in my free time so I don't have to justify spending the time on it. Like, there's so much passion built up. And I think one of the challenges is that it's far from all leaders and managers that necessarily understand the value that these people can bring. And I think the challenge that the younger engineers with these skills have is that they may know all these cool ideas, but it's difficult for them to translate it into something that brings value to the project, like a value that senior management also understands as value. So there can be a disconnect sometimes with the expectations from management and these like wild idealistic desires from the young computational designers. So I think my best advice would kind of be to really try to understand how what you're doing is tapping into what the project actually needs. Before you do any fancy automation or anything, ask, what is the problem I'm solving? Not what is the solution I want to deliver, but what is the actual problem? I think many development projects would never happen if that question would be asked, because many times we're just developing a cool idea rather than a solution. So I think you would have more success as a computational designer if that's a question you're good at asking.
Yeah.
And then, if I may add one thing to it, I learned, or it came to me like actually very, very late in my own career, that there are kind of 4 groups you can put a development task into. And it is like 2 groups of that is it something you're already doing, or is it a new process? So for example, if you want to automate copy pasting data from Excel, it's something you already have to do. So can you do it in a different way? So that's often quite easy to go to, but maybe like it's not going to take you to the moon. On the other hand, you have things that we're not already doing. That can be generative design, crazy optimization algorithms, these things that can really deliver next level results, but it's an added kind of process. If you have those 2 in mind and you're very conscious about, am I doing an existing process or a new process, then you're going to be able to communicate it much, much better and also understand if it's something that should be pursued. And then, so that's the 2 groups, and those can be again divided into one, that is it a unique problem, or is it a problem we encounter again and again and again? So if you're a computational designer and you just want to have success with something, I would say target a process that is actually unique to a project and that you have to do anyway, because then you're 100% sure that it's going to be used, and it's quite easy to convince someone that, hey, I can do this better, so let's do it. Then you can always see, hey, is this process worth using on more projects? But start on a single project, see if you can automate it there. And then if you want to go all in and see if you can target many projects with a new process, then just be aware that it's a much more tricky thing to get through. So that's what I failed at doing quite often. I failed to distinguish what is my development idea, where does it belong? And I think if I would shoot 10 ideas in this existing process corner, then I would probably have had more success with some of these development ideas.
So maybe the crystal ball question, just to put up.
Yes.
Where do you think we are in 10 years' time? 5 years' time, 20 years' time? What is your expectation for this niche industry we are in?
That's a good question.
More automation, I guess. But,
yes, I have like a feeling that there's going to be more companies taking on the full process. I see a lot of value in companies being able to own both the design, engineering, and construction process, because that's when you can really start getting full value out of these automation processes, because that's a different business model. That's a business model where you're not selling hours, but you're selling a product. So I think those kind of companies could have a better time in the future. If we stick to our current business models, I think we'll get more automation, we will increase, but I don't see any like radical crazy changes in the next 10 years. But I do see us designing better buildings. I think to add to that, the whole new requirement of sustainable design, like it's of course not a new requirement, but it's so much more in focus now than it was ever before, has forced companies into thinking in new ways. It's suddenly forcing companies to say, hey, we can't just design like we always did. We can't just throw concrete slabs and concrete columns because it's cheap and easy. We have to think, and how can we do that in a smart way? I actually think this extra focus on sustainability has been one of the best things to happen both for the world and for computational design community, because there is this need for solutions.
Very good. Timo, it was a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better, and thank you for participating in one of our talks. We see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.